I saw my son's car and decided to surprise him for his birthday by hiding in the back seat with his gift. Then he got in with someone who said, "Your pathetic mother won't be a problem much longer." My heart stopped. And when I peeked between the seats to see who was sitting next to him, I felt the air leave my lungs. The betrayal, the shock, the rage. It all hit me at once. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're tuning in from. My name is Arabella, but everyone calls me Belle. At 65, I thought I had lived long enough to know what betrayal felt like, but nothing prepared me for this. Life had taught me many lessons. I'd buried a husband, raised my only son on my own, and worked every job I could just to keep food on the table. From cleaning houses to sewing clothes late into the night, I did it all with one purpose: to make sure my son never felt the hunger or cold that I once endured as a child. He was my pride, my heartbeat, my reason for still getting up each morning, even when my knees ached and my back screamed from years of labor. And though I didn't have much, I always gave him everything. That's why, when his birthday came around, I wanted to do something special. I had saved up for months to buy him a watch he'd once pointed out in a shop window. Something that would remind him, no matter how busy life got, that time spent with family was precious. The plan was simple: hide in the back seat of his car with the gift, wait for him to come out of work, and surprise him with a smile. It was supposed to be a sweet memory, a happy one. But instead, it turned into a nightmare. I slipped into his car quietly, clutching the little box wrapped with trembling hands. My heart was racing, not because I was nervous, but because I was excited, like a little girl planning a mischief. I imagined his laugh when he found me, his hug, maybe even a, "Mom, you're crazy." But then the driver's door opened. My son slid in, and before I could reveal myself, the passenger door clicked too. That's when I heard it. "Your pathetic mother won't be a problem much longer." At first, I thought I misheard. Maybe it was a joke, or maybe my tired ears were playing tricks on me. But then, the voice repeated it. Cold, cruel, and full of venom. I froze. My hands clenched so tightly around the gift box that the ribbon cut into my skin. I felt my chest tighten, my breath grow shallow. Peering just slightly, I finally saw who it was. And that's when my world shattered. The person sitting next to my son wasn't a stranger. It wasn't just anyone. It was someone I had welcomed into my home, someone I had cooked for, smiled at, and treated like family. The betrayal was so sharp, I thought I might faint right there in the back seat. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to cry out, "How could you? After everything I've done for you both." But instead, I stayed silent. I bit my tongue until it bled. Because instinct told me, if they didn't know I was there, I could learn the truth. My son laughed nervously, his voice low. "Just don't talk about it here," he muttered, starting the car. But she didn't stop. She leaned closer, her perfume suffocating the small space, and whispered, "Relax. Soon she'll be out of the picture. Then you won't have to worry about her embarrassing you anymore." Out of the picture? Do you know what those words feel like when you've given your life for someone? It's not just betrayal. It's murder without a weapon. A declaration that your existence is nothing but an inconvenience. I sat there, invisible, tears burning my eyes. Every mile they drove, every casual remark they made, twisted the knife deeper. And that's when something inside me changed. I realized this wasn't just about my son's fiancé. No, this was about him, too. Because he didn't defend me. He didn't shut her down. He didn't say, "Don't talk about my mother that way." He let it happen. That night, in the shadows of that car, I felt something inside me harden. If my own flesh and blood could sit there and allow such venom, then maybe it was time I stopped being the naive, loving mother who always forgave. I knew right then there would be no tears, no begging, no pleading for their love. There would only be silence, observation, and when the time came, revenge so quiet, so devastating, that they wouldn't see it until it was too late. I froze in the back seat, clutching the small wrapped box in my hands, the birthday gift I had bought for my only son. It was supposed to be a surprise, a sweet moment between mother and child. Instead, my heart raced so hard I thought it might break through my chest. The voice I heard, cold and venomous, belonged to none other than Elena, my son's fiancée. She was sitting in the passenger seat, leaning close to him, her tone low but dripping with malice. "Your pathetic mother won't be a problem much longer," she repeated, almost as if she enjoyed the cruelty of her own words. I felt my breath catch. For a moment, I thought maybe I had misheard. Maybe my old ears were playing tricks on me. But no, the words echoed clearly. They were sharp, deliberate, and full of intent. I stayed perfectly still, my hand tightening around the gift. I didn't dare move, didn't dare even breathe too loudly. My son, Daniel, chuckled nervously in response. It wasn't a joyful laugh. It was the laugh of someone caught between discomfort and complicity. "Don't talk like that," he muttered. "She's still my mom." Still. The words sliced through me like a blade. Still my mom. As though I were a burden, an afterthought, something temporary he was tolerating out of obligation. Elena smirked. I could hear it in her tone even though I couldn't see her face. "Daniel, you're a grown man now. Don't you think it's pathetic how she clings to you? Always around, always fussing. She doesn't belong in our life. And soon, she won't be." I bit the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted blood. I wanted to leap forward, scream at her, demand to know what she meant. But instinct told me to stay quiet, to gather information before revealing myself. As I sat there, my body trembling in the shadows of the back seat, memories flooded me. Of raising Daniel alone after his father died, of working 2 jobs to put him through school, of sacrificing every ounce of my youth so that he could have a better life. I remembered the nights I went hungry so he could eat, the winters I wore old coats so he could stay warm. And here was this woman, this stranger, daring to call me pathetic, daring to suggest I didn't belong in my own son's life. I wanted to hate Daniel in that moment too, for not defending me properly, for letting her words hang in the air without outrage. But a mother's love is complicated. It's made of pain and forgiveness, of heartbreak and hope. So instead of hating, I stored away my anger. I let it harden into something sharper, something I could use. Elena's next words made my blood run cold. "Don't worry," she said sweetly. "I have a plan. Once we're married, she won't even have a place to live. That house will be ours. And then," she paused, lowering her voice, but I heard every poisonous syllable. "Then your dear mommy will finally be out of the picture, for good." Daniel stayed quiet this time. No nervous laughter, no protest. Just silence. That silence told me everything. He wasn't just a victim of Elena's manipulation, he was complicit. Maybe not in spirit, but in action. He wasn't stopping her, he wasn't protecting me. The car ride was the longest of my life. Every bump in the road rattled through me like thunder. I sat there, invisible, while my own child and his fiancé plotted my erasure. When the car finally pulled into the driveway, I stayed still. Daniel and Alana got out, laughing lightly, oblivious to the storm brewing just feet behind them. They didn't even check the back seat. That was their mistake. As they walked toward the house, I finally exhaled. My body was shaking, but my mind was clear. I slid out of the car silently, clutching the gift box. I didn't walk toward the house. Instead, I slipped around the side, through the garden I had planted with my own hands years ago. My sanctuary, my soil, untouched by Elena's cruelty. There, under the shadow of the roses, I sat on the cold stone bench and allowed myself to cry. Not of weakness, but out of release. Tears dried quickly, though, replaced by something stronger, resolve. I realized in that moment that I couldn't confront Elena and Daniel directly. Not yet. That would give away my knowledge, my advantage. No, I needed to be smarter, quieter, the very same way they thought they were being. If they wanted to play games, I would play better. I wasn't some frail, pathetic old woman. I was Belle, a survivor, a fighter, a mother who had already conquered life's worst battles and come out alive. Elena didn't know who she was dealing with. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I began to plan. I thought of every conversation I'd overheard, every arrogant smirk Elena had given me, every time Daniel brushed me off when she was around. I replayed it all like a puzzle clicking into place. I realized something crucial. Elena wanted my house. She wanted me gone. And Daniel, whether blinded by love or cowardice, was letting her pull the strings. Well, if they wanted the house, I would make sure it became their downfall. I began gathering documents the next morning. Bank papers, property deeds, insurance records. Years of careful savings and investments lay neatly in my possession, and Elena didn't even know the half of it. They thought I was just the mother, just a frail old woman holding on to memories. But they were about to learn that I held the keys to everything they desired, and I would not give them up easily. As I sat at my kitchen table, papers spread out before me, the morning sun filtering through lace curtains, I whispered aloud, "You think I'm pathetic? You think I don't belong? Oh, Elena, you have no idea what you've just awakened." And with that, I began laying the foundation for a revenge so silent, so devastating, they would never see it coming. The hardest part of all was pretending everything was normal. To the outside world, I remained the same. Warm smiles at breakfast, small kindnesses, a neat house and garden, but underneath, I was working like a woman possessed, not by rage, but by precision. If Alina and Daniel thought they could erase me with whispers and charm, they didn't understand how stubbornly careful I'd been with my life. Every receipt, every statement, every title in my name was a lifeline I could tighten when the time came. First, I secured the paperwork. I went through drawers, safety deposit boxes, and old envelopes I'd tucked away for a rainy day. The deed to the house, my name on the bottom like a signature of sacrifice, lay where it always had. My savings, long the result of decades of thrift and overtime, were organized and protected. I made copies and left originals locked in the bank. I called my attorney, Rosa, and asked only one question. Can Daniel and Elena legally force me out of my own home? Rosa's voice was steady. Not if the deed is yours, but if they try anything, we'll respond. Quietly, legally, we'll close every door. Rosa became my covert ally.
She set up a consultation disguised as routine paperwork review. She advised putting certain accounts into a revocable trust and changing the access privileges on financial instruments. She said, "We'll make it so they can't sign anything on your behalf. If she tries to pressure him into transferring anything, it won't hold up in court." I felt the weight lift a fraction. Protection felt like a small victory.
Next, I collected witnesses, though I didn't call them that. I spoke to neighbors who had seen Elena's impatience and petty cruelty. I chatted with the postal delivery man who'd once heard Elena mutter that old things should be thrown away. I arranged a quiet tea with Mrs. Patel, who admitted she'd heard Elena say that my time was up. Each small admission was a thread in a tapestry I was weaving. It wasn't gossip, it was documentation. At the same time, I tightened my relationship with Daniel, but gently. The old tactics, confrontations, ultimatums, had failed before because they put him on the defensive. So I used softness. I cooked his favorite dishes. I asked about his work. I threaded conversations with memory, recalling times he'd laughed as a child, the little promises we'd made together. Nostalgia is a subtle lever. It softens even the hardest stubbornness. One afternoon, while hanging laundry, I asked him casually about the house plans he and Elena had been discussing. "What color were you thinking for the nursery?" I said, as if ignorant of the turmoil. He answered, distracted, "She wants pastel green. She's been buying things." He didn't ask why I knew. He was tired, I could see, the strain of trying to make everyone happy. So I said, "Do you remember when you wanted bright blue walls because you liked the sea? You changed your mind because you thought of me. That meant a lot." His shoulders eased. He smiled, remembering. I didn't press. I simply kept a hand open, a bridge, not a barricade. Meanwhile, Elena kept pushing. She began respectfully attending our neighborhood association meetings, smiling at faces she'd never met before. Publicly, she was dazzling. Privately, she tried to isolate Daniel. She undermined him in small ways, decisions made without consulting him, thinly veiled complaints about his lack of ambition, subtle urgings that he should prioritize their new life. Each time Daniel stumbled, she was there with a solution, which tied him closer to her. That was part of her skill. She didn't shout. She wove doubt like silk. But silk frays under steady use, and I was patient usage personified. A breakthrough came when I found a receipt that matched a string of odd withdrawals from a joint card Daniel had signed years ago. Elena had been using discretionary funds in a way that could be framed not merely as spendthrift behavior, but as financial manipulation. I took a photo, logged the date, and placed it gently in a folder titled, "For Rosa." This was the sort of thing that, in isolation, looked trivial. Together with other moments, it would have weight. I also began to let small truths slip into conversation. Careful, not accusatory. At dinner, I might say, "I worry about my accounts because of identity theft these days. It's better to be safe." Or when she complained about my antiquated ways, I would laugh and say, "I just like knowing where everything is. That's how I kept the household afloat when your father died." Subtle reminders of my role, my competence. They were small arrows aimed at opening Daniel's eyes. And then a moment came that accelerated everything. Elena had invited a group of friends over for a planning party, a so-called baby orgy of Pinterest dreams. She was in the center, dazzling, directing the decor like a general. In the corner, a woman from Elena's yoga class made a passing remark about helping with paperwork if ever needed. Elena's laughter was too sharp. "Oh, we'll handle it. You don't need to worry about old paperwork like that," she said dismissively. Old paperwork? That phrasing was the misstep I'd been waiting for, a casual dismissal of the very things that defined my independence. Later that evening, I uploaded a carefully redacted timeline into a folder that Rosa could use if necessary. Dates, receipts, quotes, witnesses, arranged neatly like the evidence I'd once used to build a life from nothing. I was not seeking revenge for revenge's sake. I was building a fortress of truth, so if Elena tried to erode my rights, she would instead find concrete anchors tying me to the life I'd built. I wanted Daniel to choose me, to see the person who'd given everything for him, but I also knew he needed to arrive at that by his own clarity. Forced choices rarely hold. His heart would return only if it had the space to see what was true. There were nights I thought about confronting Elena directly, shouting all the hurt into the open, but the lawyer's voice in my ear reminded me that truth boxed and presented is far more dangerous than rage unleashed. So I kept my calm surface and let the legal undercurrent run strong and sure. And little by little, the world turned. People who had once admired Elena's polish began noticing the strain. Friends asked awkward questions. A few of Elena's quiet allies withdrew, unsure how to defend thin kindnesses when weighed against a growing pattern. Daniel started sleeping more at the house and less in their apartment. He called less often with excuses. He arrived more often without an agenda. The rope that had tied him to Elena began to fray. One night he came to me, voice low, eyes worried. "Mom, I don't know what to do. I feel lost." He sat, and for the first time in a long while, it felt like the boy I raised had come back. I handed him a cup of tea, and in that small gesture, there was a message. I was here, steady, waiting. Not to control his life, but to offer him the chance to choose truth. The trap was not a snare I had set for him. It was clarity I had prepared for both of them. Patience had been my ally, evidence my sword. And now, as small cracks widened in Elena's mask and Daniel's confusion deepened, I knew the decisive moment was not far off. The night Daniel came to me with his uncertainty, I knew the tide was turning. He wasn't ready to name it yet, but doubt had crept in. That's the first stage of breaking free from someone's manipulation, when the story no longer feels airtight. I didn't push, I simply listened. Every word he spoke was a quiet victory. Meanwhile, Elena's mask began to slip. It started small, missed appointments, a sharpness with neighbors she couldn't charm away, overspending she couldn't easily explain. People who once admired her were beginning to notice that behind the perfect smile was a woman with cracks running deep. I didn't exploit them immediately. I let the cracks widen, let her frustration grow. But behind the scenes, I was setting up the stage. It was my idea to host a dinner. Just a small gathering of family friends, Daniel's colleagues, and Elena's parents. I framed it as a celebration for Daniel's recent work achievement. Elena, ever eager to play hostess, jumped at the chance. She insisted on overseeing the menu, decorations, the entire performance. But I had chosen the guest list carefully. Rosa, my lawyer, was there. So were two of the neighbors who had witnessed Elena's cruel remarks, and a longtime friend of mine who worked in immigration services, invited as an old friend from church. You see, I wasn't planning to attack Elena outright. I was going to let her do what she always did. Talk too much, underestimate me, and overplay her hand.
That evening, as wine flowed and conversation hummed, Elena shone like always. She bragged about Daniel's future, hinted at their plans for the house, and even tossed in a laugh about simplifying old paperwork. It was subtle, but the words were poison. Rosa raised an eyebrow. My neighbor glanced at me. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. I let the silence stretch a beat too long. Then I smiled, sweet as honey, and said, "Oh, yes, about the paperwork. I've already updated the trust. The house, the accounts, everything, all properly secured. It's nice to know where one stands, isn't it? The room cooled. Elena's smile faltered just slightly. She covered it with a sip of wine, but I saw the panic flicker in her eyes. Later, when the conversation turned to family, Elena couldn't resist. She launched into a story about modernizing families, how the younger generation must sometimes take responsibility from the old. She laughed lightly, glancing at me. Of course, Belle has been generous, but at some point, we all need to step aside, don't we? It was meant as a joke, a jab cloaked in charm. But this time, people didn't laugh. Her parents shifted uncomfortably. Rosa leaned forward. Daniel looked stricken. I didn't need to say much, just a quiet, "Step aside?" Interesting choice of words. Because when you've built something with your bare hands, stepping aside isn't a gift. It's erasure. The weight of truth landed harder than anger ever could.
After the dinner, Daniel stayed behind. His voice trembled when he asked, "Mom, did you really put everything in a trust?" "Yes," I said gently, "to protect what I've worked for, to make sure it isn't taken, not by anyone, not even you if you're pushed into something you don't want." The relief in his eyes broke my heart. He hadn't realized how tangled he'd been. He whispered, "She keeps saying the house should be ours, that you don't need it." I didn't want to believe her, but, "Mom, I don't know what's real anymore." That was the moment I had been waiting for. Not to gloat, not to punish, but to show him, you still have a choice. Of course, Elena didn't take the humiliation lightly. The very next week, she confronted me in private. Her mask was gone, her voice sharp. "You think you're clever, don't you? Parading your little trust papers in front of everyone, embarrassing me. But Daniel is mine. Do you understand? He listens to me. You're old, Belle, outdated, and sooner or later, no amount of paperwork will change that." Her words didn't frighten me. They confirmed everything. I smiled softly, like she was a child throwing a tantrum. "I'm glad you're honest at last. It makes things simpler. But remember this, Elena. When people show who they really are in public, they can't take it back. And you showed quite a lot." Her eyes narrowed, full of venom, but she didn't know the half of it. What she didn't realize was that several of her remarks had been overheard, not just by me, but by people who mattered. The neighbor who'd once heard her insults was present at dinner. Rosa had made careful mental notes. Even her own parents had looked uneasy. By letting Elena expose herself, I had turned her strength into weakness. The very charm she used as armor was now crumbling into evidence of arrogance. And Daniel? He was watching closely now. The days following the dinner were heavy with silence. Daniel spoke less to Elena. He spent more evenings at my house, helping in the garden, reminiscing about his father. He confessed he felt suffocated, like he couldn't think straight when Elena was around. I didn't feed his anger. I simply asked questions. "Do you feel seen when you're with her? Do you feel respected?" He shook his head. Then, quietly, I reminded him. The way someone treats your mother is often the way they'll treat you. Today it's me. Tomorrow, it will be you. The truth hit home. I could see it in his eyes. Alina wasn't blind. She noticed Daniel slipping away. She doubled down, planning grand gestures, throwing herself into occurrences, trying to lure him back with promises of a glittering future. But the more she tried, the more obvious her desperation became, and the more obvious her desperation, the thinner her charm wore. People were whispering now. Her perfect image was stained. Daniel's loyalty was fraying, And I had every piece of evidence ready in my folder, every witness aligned, every safeguard in place. The storm was building, and Elena didn't even realize she was standing in the eye of it. I knew what was coming. The collapse wouldn't be quiet, but it would be inevitable. And when it came, Daniel would finally see her for who she truly was. Because you can fool the world with smiles for a while, but when the mask cracks, the truth doesn't whisper, it roars.
The collapse didn't come all at once. Like a dam cracking, it started with hairline fractures. But when it burst, there was no stopping it. Elena had always thrived on control, of appearances, of narratives, of Daniel's loyalty. But the harder she clutched at him, the more he slipped through her fingers. And then, the night everything unraveled, I was there to see it. It was Daniel's birthday. Elena insisted on throwing a grand dinner, inviting friends, colleagues, and even a few of my neighbors. She wanted a stage, a performance. I had no objections. In fact, I encouraged it. Quietly, I made sure Rosa was present again, and I asked one of my neighbors, the one who'd overheard Elena's cruel words months ago, to join. I wasn't plotting a public attack. No. I simply knew that when people like Elena are desperate, they expose themselves. And expose herself, she did. Halfway through the evening, Elena rose with her glass of champagne. She tapped it with a spoon, smiling with all the practiced warmth of a politician.